She vanished as if she never existed, leaving behind a locked car, her purse, and phone untouched on the seat. The red Chevrolet sat quietly on the side of Bluegrass Parkway under the heavy July heat of Kentucky. No signs of a struggle, no blood, just an eerie, suffocating silence. Crystal Rogers, 35 years old, a mother of 5, was believed to be asleep when her boyfriend left the room. By morning, he claimed she was gone. But if that's true, why was her phone still in the car? Police said there were no signs of foul play. But Crystal's mother looked at that empty driver's seat and knew something wasn't right. Weeks later, it was revealed that one of the officers involved in the investigation was the brother of Crystal's boyfriend, and he had tried to interfere with key evidence. A year after Crystal disappeared, her father, who never stopped searching for his daughter, was shot and killed while out hunting with his grandson. 2 disappearances, 1 shattered family, and nearly a decade of suspicious silence. The question isn't just who killed Crystal, it's why has the truth been buried for 8 years? Bardstown, Kentucky, a small town of just over 10,000, surrounded by bourbon fields and old country churches, once called the most beautiful small town in America. But for the Rogers family, it became a place they could no longer breathe. Crystal grew up in Bardstown in a quiet, working-class white Catholic family. She was the middle child. Her mother described her as soft as marsh grass, but fierce when it came to her children. Crystal loved flowers, the ocean, and sunset photos. She had 5 kids by 2 different fathers and lived in a suburban home with her current boyfriend, Brooks Houck. Brooks was well known around town, a real estate developer from a connected local family. His brother was a police officer and his grandparents owned land in the area. But behind that surface-level success, Crystal's family always felt something was off. Crystal once told her best friend she wasn't happy anymore, that she felt more like a live-in nanny with shared kids than a real partner. The relationship had been growing cold. According to Crystal's mother, Brooks was controlling, rarely letting her go anywhere alone. He didn't like her posting photos, didn't like her talking to exes, and especially didn't like her pushing back on parenting issues. One night at dinner, Crystal told her mom, "If anything ever happens to me, keep an eye on Brooks." It sounded like just a passing comment. No one imagined that weeks later, Crystal would truly disappear. On her last day, Crystal went shopping with one of her children. She came home and texted her mom to say she was fine and that they'd meet the next day. But that meeting never happened. That night, according to Brooks, they watched TV. She played on her phone, then went to bed. By morning, she was gone. He didn't call the police. He didn't even look for her. It wasn't until 2 days later that Crystal's mother was the one to report her missing. When officers came to question him, Brooks was oddly calm. He said Crystal probably went somewhere and would be back soon. But Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, knew better. Her daughter would never leave her children without a word, especially not the youngest, just 2 years old. And when police checked Crystal's phone, they found the last message she sent was to Brooks. Sherry Ballard isn't the kind of woman who gives up. A mother of 3, she knew every shift in her children's voices, every flicker in their eyes. With Crystal, she always sensed her daughter was carrying something heavy, something unspoken. Some days, Crystal would laugh and talk non-stop about the kids, about work. But other nights, Sherry would find her sitting silently on the back steps, arms around her knees, eyes empty. "I'm fine," Crystal always said. But Sherry knew, when a woman says she's fine, she's often suffering the most. When Crystal vanished, no note, no warning, that maternal instinct inside Sherry lit up like a wildfire. She didn't believe her daughter would leave her children. She didn't believe Crystal would go anywhere without telling someone. And she certainly didn't believe a mother like her daughter would willingly walk away. She called Brooks, the one person who should have been first to raise the alarm. His voice was curt, distant, so cold it chilled her. When she asked the last time he saw Crystal, Brooks said, "That night, she was on her phone. Next morning, she was just gone. No panic, no worry." Like he was talking about a misplaced jacket. Hours later, Crystal's family began their own search. They found her red Impala abandoned on the shoulder of the highway. The doors were locked, keys still in the ignition, her purse, wallet, and phone untouched. But Crystal was nowhere to be found. Sherry stood next to the car, her hands trembling as she opened the driver's side door. The smell of leather and Kentucky heat poured out. Inside, everything felt eerily still, like Crystal had just been there a minute ago, but also like she had never been there at all. "I knew in that moment," Sherry said. I knew I'd never see her again. But I also knew if I didn't fight, no one else would. In those early days, while police still floated the theory that Crystal might have walked away on her own, Sherry hit the ground running. She printed flyers, called the media, organized searches. She refused to let time wash away the truth. And what kept her going was the memory of a single sentence Crystal once said, just once, but enough to stay with her forever. If anything ever happens to me, keep an eye on Brooks. July 3rd, 2015. Kentucky was heavy with summer heat. Crystal Rogers left home, according to Brooks, to go shopping. She took one of the kids with her, came back that afternoon, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Later, she texted her mom and a few friends. The last message went out at exactly 7 o'clock p.m. After 7 o'clock, all communication from Crystal stopped. The next morning, Brooks said he woke up and she was gone. But he didn't text her. He didn't call her family. He didn't notify the police. In his later statement to investigators, Brooks insisted, "She'd go out for a few hours sometimes without telling me. I figured she just stepped out." But that didn't line up with anything people knew about Crystal. Crystal always had her phone on her. She never left her children without saying something, especially not her youngest, a toddler she cared for every single day. She had plans the next day, appointments with her mom, her best friend, plans she never missed. And no one in her family could recall her ever disappearing for hours, like Brooks claimed. 2 days later, it was Crystal's mother, not Brooks, who officially reported her missing. That's when Brooks suddenly began acting cooperative, or at least tried to appear that way. The Nelson County Sheriff's Office launched the initial search. They visited Brooks's home, performed a basic search, asked about Crystal's habits, and pulled nearby surveillance footage. But what they found was mostly nothing. No video of Crystal leaving the house. No witnesses who saw her after that evening. No activity on her phone. It was like Crystal had evaporated, leaving no physical trace behind. Her red Chevrolet Impala was found a few miles away, abandoned off the Bluegrass Parkway near mile marker 14. The car wasn't broken into. Nothing had been ransacked. Her phone, purse, and wallet were all still sitting on the front seat. The doors were locked, the keys were still inside. And that detail chilled people to the bone. Because if someone leaves willingly, they take their phone. If there's a struggle inside the car, there are signs. But here, everything looked too normal. So normal it was unnerving. It was as if the car had been staged, to look like Crystal had just stepped out for a minute. But Sherry Ballard wasn't buying it. When she looked inside that vehicle, one thought cut through her like lightning. This wasn't Crystal's doing. Someone did this. To her and the rest of the family, this was never just a missing persons case. But the police weren't ready to call it anything else. They followed protocol, questioning witnesses, checking phone records, searching nearby woods. And as always, they started with the last person to see the victim. Brooks Houck was brought in for questioning. In the interrogation footage, he sat casually, arms crossed, voice steady and oddly emotionless. He repeated that he didn't know anything, that when he woke up, she was just gone. Asked why he didn't report her missing, he shrugged. She's left for a few hours before. Detective John Snow, who led the interview, described Brooks as emotionally detached. No panic, no grief, no worry, and, most notably, he never once asked, "Have you found her yet?" Meanwhile, investigators discovered that during Brooks's questioning, he had placed a call to his brother, Nick Houck, a local police officer. That call happened in the middle of the interview, a call that should never have happened in any impartial investigation. The next day, Nick was summoned, but instead of helping, he refused to take a polygraph. He grew defensive, claimed he had nothing to do with it, didn't understand why he was even being questioned. A week later, he reluctantly agreed to the test and failed. The examiner's report noted that Nick was deceptive when asked about his whereabouts the night Crystal disappeared. That's when the case began to unravel. Detectives widened their focus to Nick's car, a white Buick, seen near where Crystal's vehicle had been abandoned. Days later, Nick sold the Buick. When asked why, he said, "I just wanted a new car." The Buick was gone. The home security cameras at Brooks' house, where Crystal lived, conveniently had no footage from that night. No images of anyone leaving. No proof she ever walked out that door. Coincidence? Or something deliberately erased? And then came a new, chilling revelation. One of Brooks's ex-girlfriends, the mother of one of his children, told investigators that he once threatened her, saying, I could make you disappear, and no one would ever find you. Those words now carried a far more terrifying weight. With law enforcement appearing stalled, Crystal's family took matters into their own hands. They formed search teams, scoured fields, creeks, and forests around Bardstown, joined by neighbors, friends, and even strangers. And leading every single search was a silver-haired, tireless man who never once gave up. Crystal's father, Tommy Ballard. He was the quiet backbone of the family, a soft-spoken man who built houses, tended his garden, and adored his grandchildren. But after Crystal vanished, something changed. He became relentless, determined, unwilling to let his daughter be reduced to just another cold case. He woke up every morning at 5 a.m., studied maps, posted flyers, drove for miles just to comb through a freshly cleared patch of woods. He logged every phone call, clipped every article, even taught himself how to read cell phone data to trace his daughter's final movements. In Tommy's eyes, Crystal wasn't gone. She was out there, held somewhere, hidden somewhere, and he would never stop searching. He often told his wife, if they think we're going to stay quiet, they're wrong, and maybe someone didn't want him talking any longer. November 19th, 2016. More than a year after Crystal vanished, Tommy Ballard took his 12-year-old grandson hunting in a field behind their home. He had taught the boy how to track deer, how to read the wind, how to stay still and watch the brush. But just minutes after they left the truck, a single gunshot rang out. Tommy collapsed, hit directly in the chest. The boy ran home, terrified. By the time police arrived, Tommy was already gone. There were no other people in sight. No shell casings. No second gun. Authorities called it an unexplained shooting, but to the family, it felt like a warning. Clear, direct, unmistakable. The one man who refused to stop looking for Crystal was now gone too. Sherry remembers the day of his funeral. Strangers showed up. They stood at a distance. No one knew who they were. No one approached. They watched, then quietly disappeared before the service ended. Now, with two family members lost, one vanished without a trace, the other silenced by a bullet, the fear in Bardstown grew louder. People began to ask, if this could happen to them, who's next? And the most disturbing part? Crystal's case hadn't moved an inch. Until, 5 years later, on a quiet morning, the FBI suddenly returned to Bardstown. This time, they brought search warrants, ground-penetrating radar, and a long list of questions no one had answered yet. A full year had passed since Crystal Rogers disappeared. Public attention began to fade, but for her family, things were only becoming clearer. Someone knew exactly what happened, and they were willing to stay silent at all costs. Buried deep in the investigation files was a detail nearly overlooked. Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, had originally agreed to take a polygraph test. But after a brief 2-minute phone call with his brother, Officer Nick Houck, he changed his mind. Brooks showed up nearly an hour late for the test, and during the session, his demeanor had completely shifted. According to the polygraph examiner, Brooks was uncooperative, shifting in his seat, breathing irregularly, classic signs of someone hiding something. And when asked, "Do you know where Crystal Rogers is?" his response triggered a significant spike. The final result was labeled deceptive. Attention then turned to Nick Houck. As a police officer, Nick knew the system well. From the start, he refused to cooperate, claiming he was offended by the suspicion. But mounting public pressure forced him to sit for an official interview. In the recording, Nick was defensive, evasive, and firmly protective of his brother. But the most troubling fact? Cell phone data placed Nick near the exact location where Crystal's car had been abandoned on the night she vanished. And then another twist. The security cameras at Brooks's home, where Crystal lived, had been disabled days before she went missing. When asked, Brooks casually said, "Must have been a malfunction." But technicians confirmed otherwise. The cameras had been shut off manually. Someone had deliberately erased potential evidence. Piece by piece, the story began to crack. The brothers' statements didn't match. Their phone locations contradicted their words. A car was suddenly sold. Security footage conveniently vanished. And through it all, neither man showed grief, urgency, or any real interest in helping find Crystal. Crystal's family called it the Wall of Silence. A wall built not only by the people closest to her, but perhaps even more disturbing, by those in power. The very people who were supposed to seek justice. Then a strange tip came in. An anonymous caller told the hotline they'd overheard a violent argument at Brooks's house on the night Crystal disappeared, but the caller refused to identify themselves. And after that one call, they never reached out again. In a town as small as Bardstown, rumors travel faster than patrol cars. And as statements began to unravel, suspicion fell not just on Brooks, but on those who had been close to him. Anna Whitesides, Brooks Houck's grandmother, was a quiet, elderly woman who owned significant land throughout Nelson County. She was close with Brooks. Locals described her as the matriarch of the Houck family, firm, private, and fiercely loyal. But what caught the FBI's attention? Shortly after Crystal vanished, an old vehicle registered to Anna, a Buick, was suddenly sold. No explanation, no record of why. That very Buick was believed to have been spotted near where Crystal's Chevrolet Impala was abandoned on the night she vanished. When subpoenaed, Anna Whitesides invoked her Fifth Amendment rights. She cited her age, declining health, and refused to answer any questions about that night. But a car sold under the radar. Phone data from Nick that matched the road of that Buick. It all deepened the suspicion. Meanwhile, a woman named Brooke, one of Brooks Houck's ex-girlfriends and the mother of one of his children, was brought in as a witness. In her statement, she revealed something chilling. She recalled Brooks once saying, "If that woman, referring to Crystal, ever causes too much trouble, I'll make her disappear and no one will ever find her." When asked if she thought he was joking, Brooke replied, "At the time, I did. Now I don't." Investigators returned to the field, this time with ground-penetrating radar, search dogs, and surveillance drones. They scanned Houck family properties, woods near Brooks's house, old vehicle storage yards. The results? No remains. No blood. No DNA. It was as if every trace had been intentionally scrubbed away. But to the FBI, that clean slate was the most suspicious thing of all. Because in real missing persons cases, there are always scraps. A footprint, a blurry camera frame, a strand of hair. But with Crystal, there was nothing. Almost as if someone who understood the system had erased it all. One senior FBI agent later said, "This isn't a random disappearance. This is a setup, a script written by someone who knows exactly how we investigate." And then a local resident came forward. They remembered hearing a truck moving slowly through the woods behind their property late at night, something highly unusual in that area. By morning, the dirt road leading into those woods had fresh tire marks. It looked like something heavy had been buried. But when police finally arrived, the land had already been leveled. Fresh soil had been poured. The entire site had been covered. And ownership of that land? It belonged to a real estate company registered to Brooks Houck. 5 years had passed. The disappearance of Crystal Rogers had faded into the background, like an old wound gathering dust in the quiet town of Bardstown. Her family kept speaking out, but there were no indictments, no arrests, no physical evidence. Then, in the summer of 2020, something unexpected happened. A technician from Kentucky Utilities was working along a rural road when he stumbled upon a spent shell casing. The location? A property once owned by Brooks Houck, near the same area where Crystal's Impala had been found years before. Too close to be coincidence. Police arrived and uncovered more. Deep tire marks in the soil, fragments of metal, and one spot where the earth had clearly sunken, unnaturally. Everything was documented and turned over to the FBI. That discovery reignited the entire case. This time, the FBI announced they were taking full control of the investigation. No more local law enforcement leading the charge. No more potential conflicts of interest standing near evidence. A federal task force from FBI Louisville arrived in Bardstown. They brought ground-penetrating radar, advanced cell phone tracking tech, and a detailed map of every location tied to Brooks Houck within a 30-mile radius. Once again, Brooks's home was searched, but this time it was different. There were news cameras, FBI agents in tactical gear, helicopters circling overhead. For the first time in 5 years, the people of Bardstown felt something they hadn't in a long time, hope that justice might finally be catching up. During the searches, the media caught sight of something odd. Federal agents carrying out a large, sealed plastic container from Brooks's home. FBI officials refused to comment on what was inside. But later, court documents described the item as suspected to contain biological material. Whispers spread instantly. Could Crystal have been right there all along? Was her body hidden, just steps from where she had lived? But it didn't stop there. During the same search, agents discovered a hidden safe embedded in the wall. Inside, burner phones, multiple SIM cards, and a wiped hard drive. That hard drive, after partial recovery, contained audio recordings from an old home security system. And in one of those clips, a voice could be heard, one very familiar. Brooks, arguing with Crystal. "You think I won't do it?" The man's voice snapped. "I told you, if you disappear, no one's going to ask." The recovered audio was short, just a few minutes, filled with static and broken fragments. But to the FBI, every word pointed them back to where this story began. Brooks Houck. A week after extracting the audio, a second search warrant was issued. This time, the target was land once owned by a construction company tied to Brooks. One of the properties sat deep in the woods, near an old rock quarry, an area the family once used for hunting. There, buried beneath layers of soil scanned by radar, investigators found something that shifted the entire case. An unnatural void, a hollow space clearly man-made. Inside, they didn't find a body, but they did find a nylon-wrapped sack. Inside the sack, women's clothing, a pair of shoes, and a rusted heart-shaped necklace, still intact. Crystal's family confirmed it was hers. The necklace held tiny photos of her 3 youngest children. After that discovery, the FBI issued an arrest warrant for Brooks Houck. 8 years after Crystal vanished, the name that had lingered in rumors was finally made official. Brooks was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. News traveled fast. On the streets of Bardstown, people paused, not in surprise, but in shock, because everyone had always suspected Brooks. But no one thought they'd actually see him in handcuffs. At the press conference, the FBI stated, "This is only the first step. The case is far from over." Because just days after Brooks's arrest, another familiar name returned to the spotlight. Nick Houck, the former police officer, the man who failed a polygraph, the man who defended his brother at every turn. Nick was not arrested, but he was summoned again, this time as a person of interest. According to inside sources, he refused to cooperate. The case of Crystal Rogers started as a missing person, then became a mystery, then a haunting shadow over an entire town. But by now, it's no longer about what happened. It's about how many people knew what happened and stayed silent. Brooks Houck's arrest was seen as the first major breakthrough in the 8-year fight for justice for Crystal Rogers. But for Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, this was far from the end, because there was still no body, no confirmed cause of death. And what they had, necklace, clothing, a shell casing, was enough to build a narrative, but not enough to close the case. At Brooks's first court appearance, his attorney made it clear, "My client is a victim of public pressure. He was arrested to satisfy public expectations, not because of compelling evidence." And truthfully, they had a point. The items recovered were all circumstantial. No DNA, no fingerprints. The recovered audio, while ominous, contained no direct confession. More critically, no one saw Crystal harmed. There were no witnesses, no established time of death, no murder weapon. The case, once seemingly headed toward resolution, now wavered on the edge. Even within Crystal's family, division surfaced. Some said Brooks being arrested is already a form of justice. Others feared if he walks free because of weak evidence, it'll be a second nightmare. Meanwhile, the FBI hit a wall. The one person who could possibly connect the missing pieces, Nick Houck, was refusing to cooperate. No testimony, no statements. One anonymous agent admitted, "There were nights we sat in the evidence room and asked ourselves, is there someone else in the system hiding the truth? Because if Brooks was guilty, who disabled the cameras? Who made the car disappear? Who warned him early enough to prepare a hard drive, a safe, and bury evidence for 8 years without anyone noticing? Or worse, was the entire system built to protect someone like Brooks?" That question cracked open something far bigger. Old files were re-examined, and from them, a disturbing theory emerged. Crystal Rogers may not have been the first to disappear in Bardstown, and she might not be the only one tied to the Houck family. The deeper investigators dug, the more they realized. Crystal's case might be just one part of something much larger and far darker. In just the 3 years leading up to Crystal's disappearance, Bardstown saw 4 major unsolved crimes, all with eerie similarities. In 2013, Officer Jason Ellis was ambushed and shot while clearing debris from a road, killed with a shotgun. No witnesses, no security footage, no arrests to this day. In 2014, a mother and daughter, Kathy and Samantha Netherland, were brutally murdered in their own home. No forced entry, nothing stolen, no suspects. Then came Crystal in 2015. And just a year later, her father, Tommy Ballard, gunned down while hunting with his grandson. Again, no witnesses, no arrests. Each case had been treated as an isolated tragedy. But now, people started to wonder, was the entire town being suffocated by something hidden, something organized? And if so, who's behind it? The name Houck no longer evoked respect, it provoked fear. The Houck family owned land. They ran real estate businesses. They had police in the family. They were close to local political figures. And whenever questions were asked, somehow, the answers never came. An anonymous clerk recalled, every time a file related to Crystal was printed, someone from another office would come ask, who requested this? Even when no one had told them. A freelance journalist once tried investigating Brooks Houck. After publishing his report, he was threatened with lawsuits. His car was vandalized. He lost access to his bank accounts. He eventually withdrew from the case, saying, there's something in Bardstown. You don't touch it if you want peace. Some who had once stayed quiet began to speak up. Others, after posting anonymously online, vanished from the internet altogether. No email, no phone, no trace. And Sherry Ballard, the mother who'd clutched her daughter's photo for nearly a decade, now faces a far more terrifying question. If Crystal was a victim, was this the act of one man or an entire system? On a dry August afternoon, under the faded sun of Kentucky, Sherry Ballard stepped out of the courthouse with a worn photo of her daughter in hand. A faded picture, slightly blurred at the edges, its corners frayed from being held too many times. Inside, Brooks Houck had just pleaded not guilty. The hearing was postponed. No verdict, no body, no justice. But Sherry didn't cry. She looked directly into the camera lens and said in a steady voice, I'm going all the way, whether the courts do or not. That sentence echoed louder than any headline. Because in Bardstown, people had waited so long for answers. They weren't even sure what they believed anymore. Many still believe Brooks is guilty. Others say, as long as the system's behind him, the truth will always be locked away. And some have started to forget. But there are things you can't erase from memory. Like the look in a 2-year-old's eyes the day Crystal disappeared, a confused gaze, searching for his mother amid a crowd of shouting adults. Like the silent hug Tommy Ballard gave his wife the night before he walked into that field for the last time. Like the heart-shaped locket found after 8 years beneath layers of still earth, still holding tiny photos of 3 children. In a world where media chases sensationalism, where public attention shifts with every headline, Crystal Rogers never got a final chapter. No dramatic breaking news. No viral clip. Just silence. And maybe that silence is what makes this story haunt us the most. Because if a woman can disappear in broad daylight without leaving a single trace, if her family can fight for nearly a decade and still not see justice, then this story isn't just about Crystal. It's about all of us.